A desperate phone call on a stormy evening forces a struggling mechanic to choose between comfort and conscience. Cal Whitaker wiped his hands on an old rag, the smell of oil still clinging to his fingers as he watched the last of the autumn light slip behind the pines. Outside his shop, the wind was picking up, flinging rust-colored leaves across the gravel like they were in a hurry to outrun the storm. The bell above the shop door jingled faintly in the wind, though no one had walked through it since noon. It was that kind of day in Clearwater Ridge. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed above a quiet stillness. Cal glanced over at the small heater glowing in the corner, and then toward the fold-out table where his daughter sat, cross-legged, coloring. Sadie had wrapped herself in an old quilt Mrs. Delaney had made years ago, one of those patchwork things that held stories between the stitches. Her tongue stuck out slightly as she concentrated on her drawing, a wobbly turkey traced from her own hand, with glitter glue outlining the feathers. "Did you finish the feet?" Cal asked, sipping the last of the lukewarm coffee from his thermos. She nodded proudly. "I gave him sneakers." He chuckled, placing the cup down with a soft clink. "Because turkeys are fast now." "Because if he had to run away before Thanksgiving, he'd have a better chance," she said solemnly, not looking up. Then, as if changing the subject in her own head, she added, "Our porch would be the perfect place for a swing." Cal gave a non-committal grunt and leaned back in his chair. The idea of a porch swing, something warm, rooted, ordinary, was both too far and too near. The phone rang, cutting through the silence like a blade. He didn't recognize the number, but answered anyway. "Whitaker's," he said. A pause. Then a woman's voice, strained and apologetic. "I'm sorry it's late. I know, but I need help. My roof. It's leaking badly. Water's pouring in. I think it's about to collapse." Cal blinked. He stood slowly, letting the rag fall from his hands. A gust of wind rattled the window. "Where are you?" She gave an address. It was near the foothills, practically nowhere. He frowned. "I'm really sorry, sir," he said, eyeing Sadie, still coloring, now humming softly. "I've got a daughter here. She's only 6. I can't leave her alone, especially not in this weather. I don't do emergency calls this late." There was silence on the line. Then her voice again, softer this time, barely holding together. "Please, I'm scared. I'm alone. The roof is creaking. I don't know what to do." And underneath that voice, the unmistakable sound of dripping water and wind crawling through a breach. Cal closed his eyes. "I hope you find someone nearby," he said, quieter now. He hung up. For a moment he just stood there, phone still in his hand, the screen going dark. Sadie looked up at him. "Was it about work?" "Sort of," he muttered. He went to pour himself another cup of coffee, but found himself staring out the window instead. The sky was bruised purple now, and the wind shoved at the trees like it had something to prove. In the distance, the first storm sirens began to groan, a low, mournful sound that always came a little too late. His boots echoed on the wooden floor as he paced. He sat, stood again, paced some more. Sadie didn't look up this time, just kept coloring, but her humming had stopped. Cal looked at her, her small back hunched over the table, that quilt sliding off her shoulder, the way she tucked her legs under like her mother used to. And he heard the woman's voice again. "I'm scared. I'm alone." The screen door creaked open with a sharp screech as the wind pulled it toward him. Cold air blew in with the sharpness of pine. He cursed under his breath and grabbed his coat. Just as he was zipping it up, there was a knock on the side door. Mrs. Delaney stood there in her fleece robe, holding a ceramic pie plate and wearing a smile that had seen a lot of years. "Thought I'd return this before the weather gets worse," she said. "Pumpkin this time was perfect, by the way." He took the plate and nodded. "Thanks." She tilted her head, watching him fidget with his collar. "You look like a man debating with ghosts." "I got a call," he said finally. "Someone out by the ridge says her roof's about to go. I told her I couldn't help, but—" Mrs. Delaney squinted up at the sky. Storms in this town don't just break branches, Cal. They stir up memories. He stood for another long moment. Then he turned to Sadie. Sweetheart, get your coat. She blinked. Are we going somewhere? He knelt in front of her. You're going to stay with Mrs. Delaney for a little bit, okay? Her brow furrowed. Why? Because someone out there needs help. 10 minutes later, they stood on Mrs. Delaney's porch. The wind had picked up, whistling through the slats. Rain had started, soft at first, then harder. Sadie clung to him as he zipped her coat. You'll be back soon? He nodded, kissing the top of her head. Before you know it. Mrs. Delaney opened the screen door. Well, come on in, darling. I just made cocoa. Sadie let go reluctantly and took the woman's hand. Cal watched them disappear inside, then turned toward his truck. The engine coughed, then caught. Headlights cut through the curtain of rain as he backed out. He didn't turn on the radio. His knuckles tightened on the wheel as he turned down the old road toward the edge of town. Behind him, on her porch, Mrs. Delaney watched the lights vanish into the downpour and whispered, just like his daddy. Just as she slipped, he arrived. The wind shoved against Cal's truck with restless fingers as he climbed the last stretch of gravel road. Tree limbs bent low across the lane, rain slicing through the air in frantic sheets. His headlights caught glimpses of an overgrown driveway, then a porch light, barely a flicker, beyond a tangle of shrubs and bare-limbed maples. He cut the engine. Silence didn't follow. The wind howled like it had something to say, and the moment he opened the door, it screamed it into his face. Cold stung his skin, and water soaked through his jacket almost instantly. He barely had time to register the house before he saw her. A shape moved above, silhouetted against the gunmetal sky. She was crouched on the sloped roof, hair whipping like a flag, fumbling with a tarp and a silver roll of duct tape. For a second, Cal thought she had it under control. Then her hand slipped. She let out a sharp cry as her foot skidded on the slick shingles. The tarp flew sideways, carried by the wind, and she pitched forward. He ran. Boots splashed through puddles, breath ripping from his lungs. She was tumbling now, arms flailing, and just as she hit the edge, he reached her. They collided with a heavy thud, momentum dragging them both down into the soggy grass. The air punched from his chest. For a second, there was only the sound of rain, and both of them groaning. She rolled off him first, clutching her leg and gasping. Oh, God! You okay? Cal pushed himself up, coughing. She looked at him, blinking through wet strands of hair. Are you the guy I called? Seems like it. He stood and offered a hand. Let's get you inside before the roof finishes the job. Inside the house, it was warmer, but just barely. The air smelled of wet wood and something citrus that had long since faded. Cal helped her limp to a threadbare couch as puddles formed beneath them. You've got towels? He asked. Bathroom, she said, teeth chattering. Cabinet behind the door. He returned a moment later with two. One he wrapped around her shoulders. The other he pressed gently to her ankle. She flinched. Sorry, you'll bruise, but I don't think it's broken. She leaned back, eyes fluttering shut for a second. Her breath was ragged. Cal stood and knelt by the hearth, fumbling with the old matches in the tray. The fire was stubborn, but finally the kindling caught, a small orange bloom that threw their shadows against the walls. The room softened with its glow. When he turned, she was watching him. I had it handled, she said quietly. He gave a half smile. Didn't look like it. She narrowed her eyes. I've patched worse roofs than that. In the middle of a storm? Silence. Cal dropped down into a worn chair across from her. The wind moaned through a gap in the window, making both of them glance up. What's your name? He asked. Lottie, she said. Well, Charlotte, but no one calls me that. Cal, he replied. Cal Whitaker. She nodded once, then glanced at her ankle. You didn't have to come. He looked at the fire, then back at her. Didn't feel right not to. That ended the conversation for a while. He found two mismatched mugs in the kitchen and poured hot water from a kettle he managed to coax into life. The powdered cocoa tasted more like sugar and memory than chocolate, but it was warm. They sipped in silence, occasionally catching each other's gaze before one looked away. Lottie's eyes were sharp, tired, but observant. She clutched her mug with both hands, steam rising into her face. "What do you do, Cal?" she asked finally. "Fix what breaks," he said, then shrugged. "Mostly cars, some plumbing, a bit of everything." She nodded. "That's useful." He raised an eyebrow. "You?" There was a pause. She took another sip before answering. "I'm between things." He didn't press. Something about her said she wouldn't answer if he did. The wind outside howled again. Rain tapped a frantic rhythm against the windows. Cal stood and stoked the fire, the warmth creeping into the space between them. Lottie pulled the blanket tighter. "I'm sorry if this put you out. Your daughter. You said she was 6. He turned, surprised. "Yeah, Sadie." "Pretty name." He smiled softly. "She's a handful. Smart as a whip. Thinks turkeys should wear sneakers." Lottie laughed, the sound brittle but genuine. "I like her already." He sat again, arms resting on his knees. "She says heroes don't fly, they just show up." Lottie looked at him then, her expression unreadable. The silence stretched. Suddenly, a soft thud broke it. A photo frame had slipped off a shelf and landed face down on the rug. Cal rose, picked it up, and turned it over. It was her, hair pinned back, wearing a charcoal blazer. Seated at a long table lined with men in suits. A nameplate sat before her, Charlotte E. McRae. He didn't say a word, just handed it back and returned to his chair. In the flickering firelight, a stranger's home begins to feel strangely familiar. The storm had passed, but the world outside still wore its bruises. Trees hung heavy with wet limbs, and the road to the McRae place shimmered in puddled reflections of pale morning light. Inside the old house, the scent of damp wood mingled with something warmer, reheated soup maybe, and faint traces of cinnamon that clung stubbornly to the kitchen curtains. Cal stood on the porch, rubbing the back of his neck as Mrs. Delaney's Buick pulled up. The tires squished over the muddy drive, and out came Sadie in her red rain boots, her backpack bouncing behind her. "She insisted," Mrs. Delaney called out from the driver's seat. "Said her turkey needed a friend." Cal chuckled. "Thanks for the ride." Sadie trotted up the porch steps, holding a folded paper carefully between mittened fingers. "It's for Miss Lottie," she said, proud. Inside, Lottie was leaning on her good foot near the fireplace, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders and a hesitant expression on her face. She stood a little straighter as Sadie entered. The girl chirped, already towing off her boots by the door. "Hi there," Lottie said softly, taken off guard. "You must be Sadie." Sadie beamed and handed her the paper. "It's my turkey. He's got boots too, like mine." Lottie unfolded it with care. The drawing was lopsided, glittery, and wonderful. She smiled genuinely this time. "He looks ready for anything." Cal hung up their jackets and nodded toward the kitchen. "She's been talking about bringing that all morning." "I can make muffins," Lottie blurted. "If that's okay." Sadie's eyes lit up. "Do they have chocolate chips?" "Jelly beans," Lottie offered, pulling herself upright. "We'll improvise." While Cal hauled tools up to the attic, Sadie helped Lottie shuffle through cabinets for a dusty box of muffin mix. They cracked eggs, spilled milk, and dropped jelly beans into the batter like it was magic. The oven groaned, protesting the effort, but held steady. The sweet, candy-scented aroma filled the house, curling around corners and up the stairs. In the attic, Cal wedged in a new support beam. His shoulders ached, but it was the kind of ache that came with doing something useful. Below him, laughter bubbled up, light, young, unfamiliar. When he came down, Sadie and Lottie were at the old upright piano in the corner of the parlor. Dust motes danced in shafts of late morning light, and Lottie's fingers moved across the keys with practiced ease. Sadie leaned against her, humming. "That's beautiful," Cal said from the doorway. It's something my mom used to play, Lottie replied. Haven't tried it in years. Sadie glanced back. She's a magic piano lady. Well, Lottie said, brushing a hair from Sadie's cheek, only sometimes. They ate dinner together, crowded around a small kitchen table that creaked every time someone leaned too far. The meal was simple, reheated soup, toast, and the slightly overbaked muffins, but no one complained. Sadie told a story about a girl who rode a turkey into space. Lottie laughed so hard she teared up. Cal smiled more than he had in months. Later, as night deepened and the house grew quiet again, Sadie nodded off in the parlor, curled on the couch beside Lottie, her head tucked against the woman's side. The ticking of the old wall clock was the only sound, steady as breath. Cal stood in the hallway, watching them for a long moment before stepping away. He moved through the dim study, scanning shelves for a book Sadie had asked for, a story with a talking horse. His fingers brushed past weathered spines, old invoices, and then paused. A leather folder sat alone, angled just so. He pulled it free. Inside were maps, architectural renderings, proposals. On the cover page, Charlotte McRae, Holdings proposal. Beneath that, zoning details, parcels of land, contracts. And suddenly, something clicked. Footsteps behind him were soft but unmistakable. He turned, the folder still open in his hands. Lottie stood in the doorway, a mug of cocoa in each hand. Her smile began to form, but then her eyes fell on the folder, and it vanished. He thought she was someone he could trust. Then he saw her name. The rain had returned by evening, soft but unrelenting, whispering against the windows of the McRae house like it remembered something it hadn't finished saying. A low hum of thunder rolled across the hills. The fire was still glowing in the hearth, but it no longer felt warm. Cal stood frozen in the hallway, the folder open in his hands, the name staring back at him like a slap. Charlotte McRae, CEO, Land Development Division, multiple holdings, some in this very county. Lottie stood in the doorway, her hands still wrapped around 2 mugs of cocoa. Her smile had evaporated, replaced by a quiet dread. "Cal," she began. He didn't answer. He just kept looking at the paper, the lines, the maps, her signature. She took a slow step forward. "I was going to tell you." "When?" His voice was low, but it held steel. "After I fixed your roof. After Sadie decided you were family." "Please," she said, setting the mugs down on the nearest table. Her fingers trembled slightly. "It's not what it looks like." "You're Charlotte McRae," he said. "McRae Holdings. You're the reason Larry had to sell his grandfather's house. The reason the post office was almost turned into a strip mall." "I didn't want any of that, but you did it." Her face twisted. "No, Cal. I signed off on it, yes, but I didn't know what they were doing with the land until it was too late. I was a figurehead. You were the one with the signature." Bishop swallowed hard. 6 months ago, I walked away from all of it. I left the board, the money, the headlines. I came here because I didn't know who I was anymore. He closed the folder gently, but with finality. "And what was this then? Some kind of experiment? Pretend you're one of us and see how long before someone catches on?" Her eyes flinched. "No. Was I supposed to feel good about myself for helping the poor little rich girl in distress?" "Stop it." He stepped forward. "Because it worked. I bought it. All of it. I brought my kid into your house. Let her fall asleep on your lap." Lottie's voice broke. "I never meant to hurt either of you." Cal's knuckles clenched at his sides. "You didn't just lie to me. You made me feel like we were building something real, but you were still hiding behind that name the whole time." "I wasn't hiding behind it," she whispered. "I was trying to escape it." Sadie's voice drifted from the doorway. "Why are you yelling?" They both turned. She stood there in her pajamas, hair tangled, rubbing one eye with the back of her hand. Cal's expression shifted, softening just a bit. "It's okay, sweetheart. Go back to bed." She didn't move. Lottie stepped forward instinctively, but Cal's tone stopped her. "Don't." Lottie froze. He took a deep breath. "We're leaving." Sadie's lip trembled. "But I didn't say goodbye." He crouched in front of her. "We'll talk later, okay? Let's get your things." Sadie looked at Lottie once more, silent, confused, then turned away. Lottie didn't follow. She just stood in the living room as Cal gathered their coats, their bags, Sadie's drawing from the table. The turkey with boots had a small smear of jelly bean color across one wing. He opened the front door. Rain pattered against the porch roof. Sadie looked back once as Cal ushered her outside. "We won't be seeing her again," he said flatly, pulling the door shut behind them. Inside, Lottie stared at the mugs of cocoa, untouched and cooling. Her hands hovered over them, then fell. She lowered herself slowly onto the couch, but it felt different now, harder, colder. She reached for the drawing left behind, but it was gone. Just a crumpled napkin remained. The rain pressed harder against the windows. She didn't cry, though her eyes stung. She sat still for a long time, the fire cracking low behind her, its light too soft to feel like warmth anymore. In the house across town, Cal moved through the motions. He put Sadie's boots by the door, hung her coat, microwaved soup neither of them touched. Sadie sat at the table, the drawing she'd rescued now folded in half. She didn't color, didn't hum, just looked out the window. He came over and knelt beside her. "You okay, kiddo?" She didn't answer. "Sadie?" She glanced at him. "You said she was kind." Cal nodded slowly. "You said she didn't ask for anything." "She didn't." "Then why are we mad?" He looked away. That night he tried to read to her, but she fell asleep before the end of the second page. He stayed there a while, listening to her breath, the soft rhythm of the ceiling fan, the wind returning in distant waves. Morning came dull and gray. The house smelled like damp carpet and burnt toast. Cal moved through the kitchen half awake, flipping the radio to the local weather. More showers expected through noon. He poured coffee and looked around. Quiet. Too quiet. "Sadie?" He called down the hallway. No answer. He checked the bathroom. Bedroom, living room. Then he saw it. The front door was ajar. Her yellow raincoat was missing. Storms tear through towns. But this one tore through hearts. Cal's boots slammed against the pavement as he turned the corner near the diner, his breath ragged in the wet air. The streetlights flickered through the mist, halos glowing in the downpour. He shouted her name again, "Sadie!" But the wind shredded it before it could carry. Only the hum of flood sirens answered, wailing across the town like distant wolves. The diner's door was locked. No one inside. The playground behind the school stood eerily still, swings creaking in the gusts. Behind the post office, he searched the alley where she once played hopscotch in the dust. Nothing. Water pooled in the gutters, racing toward the storm drains. Every shadow looked like her. Every silence felt like guilt. He had no idea how long she'd been gone. Back home, the raincoat was missing. The side gate had been left open, one boot print visible in the soft soil. She had left on purpose. That much was clear. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He picked up without hesitation. "Cal, it's Lottie." He froze. Her voice was calm but urgent. "I think I know where she is." His knuckles whitened. "Where?" "She told me once. She said the old church on the hill looked like a castle for people who are sad. I'm already on my way." The line went dead. Cal turned on his heel and sprinted for the truck. It roared to life beneath him, tires spitting gravel as he tore out of the driveway. The windshield wipers fought the downpour, barely keeping up. Trees leaned hard over the road, and the creek at the edge of town had already spilled into the shoulders. 10 minutes felt like forever. The church appeared like a phantom, its steeple jagged against the ink sky, windows boarded in places, stained glass shattered in others. He pulled up fast, braking in the mud, headlights washing over stone steps slick with moss and rain. The wooden doors creaked open with effort. Inside, the musty air hung heavy. Rain dripped through holes in the roof, plinking against pews coated in dust. And then he heard it, a sound so soft he almost missed it. A sob. He turned, flashlight beam sweeping until it landed on a cluster of shadow in the front corner near the altar. There, beneath her yellow raincoat, sat Lottie, her arms wrapped tightly around Sadie, shielding her from the cold. Sadie's eyes were red and wide, but she was safe. Cal dropped to his knees beside them. "Sadie," he breathed, voice cracking. "Daddy," she whispered, reaching for him. He gathered her into his arms, pressing her close, kissing the top of her damp head again and again. "I've got you. I've got you. I'm here." She clung to him. "I'm sorry. I just wanted to see her. I didn't mean to scare you." "You're okay," he whispered, rocking her gently. "That's all that matters." When he looked up, Lottie was still kneeling there, soaked through, hands trembling in her lap. He met her eyes. No anger, just something deeper, tiredness, regret, and something else trying to break through. "I was wrong," Cal said softly. "Not just about you, but about what matters." Lottie didn't speak right away. The storm outside had dulled to a steady rhythm, rain tapping gently against glass shards. Sadie, warm between them now, had begun to doze again, her fingers curled into Cal's shirt. Lottie reached out slowly, brushing wet strands of hair from Sadie's forehead. The three of them stayed like that for a long time, huddled in the quiet echo of the old church. The stained glass window behind the pulpit caught the first thin light of dawn, just enough to send slivers of color across the dusty pews. Lottie looked toward the door, then back at Cal. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I can leave if you want." Cal didn't look away. No, not again. The land she once nearly took now held homes she helped build. Sunlight spilled over Clearwater Ridge like a quiet promise, warm and golden. The breeze carried the scent of new grass and honeysuckle, mingling with fresh paint and sawdust. Where once there had been overgrown lots and cracked foundations, now stood rows of modest houses, white trim, wide porches, flower beds waiting for roots. Each porch had a swing. The sign at the edge of the neighborhood read, "Hearts of the Ridge, a place to begin again." Cal stood beneath a white canopy, a clipboard in one hand, his other adjusting a tie that Sadie had insisted he wear. She'd said it made him look official, like a mayor or a preacher. He didn't argue. Beside him, Mr. Larry, cane in hand, grinned from ear to ear as neighbors gathered. Once displaced by a corporate buyout, now he held the keys to a home with his name on the mailbox. "Didn't think I'd be around to see this," Larry murmured. Cal smiled. "I'm glad you are." The crowd quieted as he stepped to the mic. "Most of you know me," he began. "You've seen my truck at the diner, my kid at the school plays. I fix things. That's what I've always done. But this wasn't just a job. This was a second chance, not just for me, for all of us." He paused, gaze sweeping the crowd until it landed on her. "She didn't come here to fix a roof," he said, voice steady. "She came to rebuild a town, and we let her. We let her become one of us, and we're better for it." Polite applause rose like a wave, but Lottie didn't move. She stood near the back, sunlight catching the curve of her smile. Beside her, Sadie tugged at her hand and whispered something. Lottie knelt, and the girl handed her a folded piece of paper. A drawing. 3 stick figures, one tall, one medium, one small, beneath a house with a big porch swing. "Our family" was written in purple crayon across the top. Lottie pressed it to her chest. Later, as the dedication faded into handshakes and lemonade, Cal met her near the front steps of the first completed home. It stood modest but proud, its siding the soft color of cream, the shutters forest green. "Looks different with curtains," he said. She smiled. "Feels different with people." They walked inside together. The floors gleamed. The kitchen smelled of fresh caulk and lemon oil. On the counter sat a bundle of wildflowers, tied with twine. "This lot," she said, touching the window pane, "used to be flagged for a fast food franchise." Cal raised an eyebrow. "We did all right then." She turned to him, eyes bright. "More than all right." He reached into his pocket. "It's not fancy," he said, opening the small box. Inside, a silver ring held a single pale stone, irregular, slightly cloudy, but beautiful in its own quiet way. "Sadie found it after the storm," he continued. "Said it looked like you, a little weathered, but still shining." Lottie's breath caught. "It's set in silver," he added, "because it's not about what it costs. It's about what it means." He looked at her, steady and sure. "Will you marry me?" Tears welled in her eyes. She nodded once. "Yes," she said. "Not because you saved me, but because you saw me." Outside, the sun dipped lower, casting long golden shadows across the gravel paths and porch rails. They stepped out together, hand in hand. Sadie was already there, skipping ahead, her cardigan flapping in the wind. She turned at the doorstep, grinning. "I call the swing first." They laughed, and as they opened the door to their home, she ran inside, barefoot and gleeful. The porch swing swayed behind her, creaking softly in the breeze. The house with the porch swing didn't just become a home, it became a reminder that healing often starts with a single act of quiet courage. In a town once split by storms and silence, kindness stitched together what pride had torn apart. When we look past appearances and meet others with open hands instead of closed judgments, we build something stronger than walls. We build trust. Like the swing that gently rocks long after someone rises from it, the impact of compassion lingers, steady and unseen. If this story touched your heart, perhaps someone out there is waiting for your warmth too.